everyone, to episode 303 of Just Joshing. I'm your host, Joshua Penteloresco. I write stuff and podcasts too. Tonight, my guest is Tracy Cooper-Posey. This started off kind of like hilariously because I still remember the look on her face. She walked in, signed up. I was doing these interviews at When Words Collide. That's right, we are starting the When Words Collide interviews. But this is, I think, a hilarious story. She's my first guest, literally my first guest of the evening. She's like, "Well, I'm here to do the interview." It's like, "Oh, that's cool. So what are we going to talk about?" "No, don't worry. We'll figure it out as we go." And the look on her face was amazing. But we had a really awesome time. Tracy's an amazing writer. She publishes a work on average once every 3 weeks. She's a workhorse, and she is an amazingly gifted writer. She has over 100 books to her name. We literally talk about her celebrating her 100th book here. So, with that all said, let's just get to that conversation, shall we?
Think you have what it takes? Get your ass to Mars. Gaia Tim is a simulation game in which you arrive on Mars ahead of the colonists about to settle into this new home. Until they arrive, you have to survive, facing limited resources and a brand new world filled with unexpected challenges. Can you establish what the colonists need to survive, or will Mars get the better of you? Gaia Tim, the Dragon Edition, launches this November, courtesy of Indie Imprint on Steam and Windows. Check out indieimprint.com for more information.
Anyways, grab your water. I love that they have water here. This is cool.
Okay.
So, anyways, I am with Tracy Cooper-Posey. Or do you prefer Tracy Posey? What do you prefer?
It's Tracy Cooper-Posey.
Yeah, all right. Just making sure here. So anyway, my first question is: if you got anything from anything you'd like to say, make it good.
I could tell you a little bit about me. You can probably tell from the accent. I'm originally from Australia. Mm-hmm. I moved here in 1996 after meeting who would become my husband on the internet, such as the internet was in those days.
So you guys were the original internet couple?
Oh, yes. I honestly, Canadian Customs had no idea what to do with me, and I came in with 2 kids as well. So it was, they literally typed up a particular visa, a special visa for me, and stapled it into my passport.
That is so cool. My dad's from Detroit, Michigan. So when he moved to Windsor after him and my mom got married, they gave him like this piece of paper. And that was it. Like that was his original passport. And 10 years later, because the states gave him this passport as he was leaving, it'd be good as long as you whatever. So 10 years later, they had to literally they couldn't figure out what they had done for him. So coming back into the country was always a bit of an adventure.
I think in those days the border control on the 48th parallel was a little bit slacker than what it was for me coming in.
Oh, absolutely. So. No. This was 1980 when that happened, and 1990 is when he ran into problems. Yeah. 1996, although still lax compared to what it is now.
I think, yes, if I had tried to do it post 9/11, would never have happened. I think they would have bailed me up in some sort of refugee site.
Well, you would have been in this no-fly zone for about a week, trying to figure it out. Yeah,
and quite possibly been put on a plane back to Australia. I'm not sure.
Maybe not. I had an ex-girlfriend. She actually decided to go to Australia for a visit. She was completely unprepared. They still let her go.
Okay.
They still let her go. I think it would have depended on the time. I think between 2001, 2005, when this was all brand new, it would have been a very, very, very SOL kind of case. But it's much like anything else. It's not only just the immediacy is gone, but there's also just the business of the worldwide. Just everybody flies, everybody travels, and it's a smaller world. It gets smaller all the time.
And I think too these days it's possibly more difficult just to get into the United States than it is to cross Australian and Canadian borders. That seems to be becoming more dramatic day by day.
Yes and no. I just recently flew from the States. I find like my passport, no problem. It's actually a lot easier. Then again, I also pack very light, which is just like one of those things where it's just like partly because I know when I go to see my grandmother, I'll have this like very light suitcase, and I'll come back and be like, okay, I can't take all this with me. What am I going to do? Grandmothers do that for the case, but it depends. I think it depends on your nationality. I think it depends on certain things.
It certainly was kind of interesting coming into the United States on an Australian passport. You get photographed and fingerprinted, and you have to have a visa and all sorts of things. But now I have a Canadian passport. Now I am officially Canadian.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. Only took me 20 years. But now I am officially a Canadian. Getting across is somewhat simpler, but I haven't been across since Trump was sitting in the White House, and I believe it's a little bit stickier these days.
If you fit certain profiles, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I fortunately don't, so it works out for me. Now, I'm going to cross my fingers. So the next time I go, who the hell knows, right?
Yeah.
But it's one of those situations. The other thing too is, I have to renew my American passport. I have an American one too. So in the event it gets really dicey, I just call on that.
Yes. Yeah. It's probably the easiest way to cross the border.
So, that border in particular.
That border.
Any other border, I show my Canadian. They like me more.
When I was much younger, I toured Europe. And we were told very distinctly, make sure you have an Australian flag showing very clearly on your jumper, on your backpack, something like that. Just because everyone was friendly towards Australians, they didn't like the American tourists.
No one does. No, they like the money. That's all they like. Yeah, that's how it goes.
Yeah, so I travelled around Europe with an Australian flag stitched to my backpack. So it made life a lot easier. They had Australian tourists have a better reputation, unfortunately.
Well, it's unfortunate. I don't really feel like I want to bash. I just was talking to Tony Phillips from the States, and we was talking about this. Like, he goes, "Yeah, I'm gonna be a good American tourist." It's like, the truth of the matter is, I mean, honestly, there's a lot of good people that do go from the States all the time. What happens, I think, is...
the occasional ugly tourist gives everyone else a very bad name, unfortunately.
Well, yeah. Like, if you're traveling, especially if you've never really traveled very much, and right, it's essentially, if you approach traveling like you're going to be a guest in somebody else's house, it doesn't matter what nationality you are, people will respect you.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. If you treat it like you own it, that's when people get a little annoyed at you, and it's a very big attitude paradigm shift.
Yes, it is. Yeah. You have to be flexible when you're traveling. You just can't assume everything's going to be the same as home. So. Yeah.
Is this your first con here?
No, this is my third.
This is your third.
This is my third. Yes.
This is the first time we've crossed paths.
Yes, it is. Yeah. I must admit that the first time I was here, I was somewhat subdued because it was my first conference. I didn't know anyone. Most of my book industry contacts are in the United States or Britain. I don't have a lot in Canada because the indie publishing world is not as active on this side of the border.
Yes.
So I kind of crept around for the first year just sussing stuff out.
Yeah, my first year here, I accidentally started my podcast.
There we go.
Yeah. It's just one of those. I had the opportunity to interview Rob Sawyer, and I was doing blogs at the time, and it was actually the room over from like the Jasper room, and what ended up happening was he talked to someone. I don't remember who he talked to afterwards. What did you just do? I just got interviewed for this podcast, and I'm like, I did not say podcast. And then it's like something in my head just said, could I do a podcast?
No, why wouldn't it? You tripped into it coming backwards.
Yeah, well, so I always tend to believe, like, personally, like, the best stuff in life happens when you stumble into it more than anything else.
Which reminds me, actually, 3 years ago was possibly not my first time, because speaking of Rob Sawyer, actually, the origins of this conference was a science fiction conference that ran for years and years and years. I came to one about 15 years ago and was on a panel with Rob Sawyer and Terry Brooks. I'm quite sure Rob Sawyer does not remember me whatsoever, but that's...
Go say hi to him. Honestly, he's a very nice guy.
But he's so busy. He must meet.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't. I look at it like this. Like he is probably one of the busiest guys here, no question about it. He's not the only one on that level here, but he's definitely is always go about doing things. But he never, if you ever get a chance to really just talk to him, he never makes you feel like that at all. You're there, and he's really good. I've been very fortunate. I get to talk to him somewhat.
Oh, I don't think I've spoken to him since that convention. So
you should.
Yeah, that was about 15 years ago. We keep crossing paths. So.
It happened. Like again, he definitely goes his own way. But what I'm saying is don't the one thing about conventions like this is you should not be shy, because you never know, right?
Yeah.
Right. The people you meet can impact you in ways you never. I always kind of make a point now when I do something like this or a conference or anything like that. It's about the impact I can make in the moment at the time, right? It's not about what happens here necessarily. It's where it leads, and you never know unless you put yourself out there. That's kind of how I look at it. It might still strike out, but if I don't take the swing, I ain't going to hit the home run.
That sounds very much like a Wayne Gretzky quote about you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take.
Absolutely, he's right. He's right. Yeah. The biggest thing I've learned about this is it's not about you can't control where success lands you. That's not actually what this is about. Like, you have goals for success, and you should, but it's not about where, like, go for those goals, but don't worry if you're not there. What matters is it's all the steps you take, doing the best you can to get to those steps, and you'll land somewhere. It doesn't necessarily, and sometimes it's better than what you actually had originally planned. Sometimes you strike out, but again, that's life. Most of us don't fear failure, I find. Most of us fear success. And the reason I say that is because when you have success, you create expectations for yourself. People like Rob and Jonas Saul and some of the other people here that have really, really done well for themselves, they've learned that they have their own imposter, right? But the thing is, they don't let that imposter get in the way of all these good things they're doing just being themselves. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what do you write?
It's kind of more what I don't write, but historical romance, fantasy romance, science fiction, thrillers, time travel. I think there's one in there I've forgotten.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. I cover quite a few genres.
Yes. So that's that stuff you liked reading when you started, or was that
I'm sorry?
Was that the stuff you liked to read when you started, or did you just kind of stumble into it?
Well, kind of a long story, because way back then, this is when I first started writing, there was only a traditional publishing industry, and the general advice then was to write what you read. The only problem was I read everything. I read science fiction, I read historicals, I read thrillers, I read romances, you name it. So I sat down and tried to figure out what the common element was in all of those, why those particular books and whatever appealed to me. And the absolute favourite of my books all had a romantic plot or subplot in them. So I thought, okay, very clearly I'm supposed to be writing romance. And 25 years later, I've discovered that I should be writing pretty much everything. So,
genres are they're great, right? And I think
I think genres are very good for marketing.
Yes.
And it's very good for readers to figure out who's writing what they like. But I think genres can be very confusing for authors.
Yes. Well, for me, I write poetry, I do comic books, I do primarily science fiction and fantasy, but I could also go into horror or humor, depending upon my mood. What I tend to find is I've learned this. I had this kindergarten assignment, and I remember this, and I apply this to my work creatively. You take a marble, you dip it in paint, you put it in a box, and you roll the marble in the box. Mm-hmm. So what happens is it's these unique little giant messes there. That's also art. I've learned now that, especially now that we're in a more independent field, right? I'm not worried about what the mess looks like, right? I'm going to make it art. And I again, maybe this will be a strikeout, but I look at people like Dan Simmons. I look at people who write a variety of genres in one story, and it can be done, and it can be done well.
The only problem is, particularly with the indie publishing industry, is that you have to be careful that you have a readership before you start branching out.
Yeah.
For any new writers, I would strongly encourage them to pick a genre, right in the middle of that genre. Don't go outside the borders, not until they've got a readership. Then they can start moving out. It makes life a lot easier as far as the marketing is concerned if they're right in the middle.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. So you started in romance.
Yes.
Then, so I imagine you went to fantasy next?
No, actually. I stayed in romance for a very long time, but I wrote about 6 different subgenres in romance, including when it started about 8-10 years ago, science fiction romance, which is 50% romance, 50% science fiction. And I love science fiction. I've been reading it forever. So now I've actually moved over into straight science fiction as well. The 3rd book of my first science fiction series comes out October, I think, off the top of my head. I've also done thrillers. But yeah, primarily I've stuck in the romance genre for that very reason that I just said, is that I've got an established readership there, so I prefer to keep those readers happy.
It's totally fine.
Well, yeah.
That's totally fair, right?
Yeah.
I mean that it makes sense.
Yeah. And see, the thing is too, is I'm writing full time, so I also have a mortgage to pay off and stuff like that.
Oh,
I can't
absolutely.
afford to wander too far as much as I would love to. So what I sometimes do instead is, in my spare time, I will write things that are purely for me, the little creative.
I think you need that. Although he doesn't have the best. Oh, actually, I'll give it as someone who did. Like Terry Brooks has done Shannara forever and ever and ever.
Yep.
And the reason he does Shannara forever and ever is because it sells. It sells.
Yeah.
But for his own sanity, because you can't just, again, you're not a machine, right? I remember he did. I can't remember the phrase. Something of the Demon, Night of the Word. That series. Yeah. That was kind of like, okay, listen, I'll do Shannara. Let me do this for my sanity.
Yeah, it's a pet project. I think we all have them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I sort of, my pet projects for a long time was just starting up a new subgenre in romance, and luckily they found a readership and they sell. So some not as well as the others, but
that's okay too. Again, that's part of the experimental process too. So we all, because we when we start, we're at a certain level, and then when we want to grow and expand, we have to find ways to grow and expand within even in those marked zones, right? I write a science fiction pulpy adventure series. So there's always going to be a science fiction pulpy adventure series, right?
I love the pulps.
I do.
They're great fun.
Oh, and I think this is kind of the right time for them to come back again.
Well, pulps, I think, are right in the middle of the mid-list authors in the indie industry are the pulp authors of this era.
Yeah.
So.
Well, no, it's also because it's perfect escapism. But I'm also looking like the other thing too. I am recording this interview on a phone inside this actually very nice room for me. Last time I was at an event, they actually put me in a room. They had like these anti-ice cream things in the mall, and it kind of looked like a giant murder. Like someone actually came in and said, "This is a room where you murder somebody," and then after that came in, it's like, I will never look at this room the same way again. And then these are romance writers, by the way. So and then a romance writer, and then the second romance writer that follows in, and it's like, well. I mean, I mentioned the murder room. She actually goes into more elaborate detail why this could be a murder room, and it's like, so it's gone. So, but
it's odd you should say that, because I'm looking at that dent in the wall, wondering who kicked that in temper.
But the thing is, I don't think that's a kick. You know what I think that is? I think somebody actually like you know how you lean back in the chair, right? Yeah, okay. That's what I think that is, right?
Oh, they just took all the fun out of it.
I'm sorry.
I'd rather have someone kick that in temper.
Well, it doesn't look like a kick print, though.
I know, but it's a story. Okay, let's call it a fist.
Yeah, fist. It feels like you look at this. Look at a fist. fist could do it, right?
Yeah, a fist could do that.
Fist could totally do it. So somebody, we're gonna say the angriest.
Well, this is outside the room is a sign that says this is the room for pitch sessions. So maybe some angry editor got totally annoyed at some poor little pitch
backhanded shot, shots. Like, damn it, you suck.
So that's much more interesting.
No, absolutely.
If there is a story involved.
Oh no! So. All right, I'm sorry for spoiling the magic trick. I'm sorry, but no, like going back to what I was saying about the phone, because we live in those eras of phones and tablets, right? The cool thing about pulps, like one of my favorite pulp writers was Roger Zelazny. He wrote incredibly tight prose and like 150 page novels.
See, I really like Isaac Asimov's
Asimov's awesome, right? Yeah. But I think, so me, this is just my opinion, Asimov as a short story writer in the pulp era was phenomenal. Isaac Asimov as a novelist in his 80s was amazing. When he got to the 1980s, when he was doing Foundations.
Foundation,
Foundation's Edge and even some of his other ones like Nemesis, right? Because he was great with concepts when he was younger, but he struggled, I think, a little bit finding his voice with characters. I think in longer works, not shorter ones, but longer ones.
He sort of washed out.
You're right. Yeah. But when he got back, when he was doing Foundation's Edge, and when he was doing those, like he was really into those characters, and you could really tell. Yeah. Anyway.
I was going to say though, my favorite series of his is the Robot series, starting off with Caves of Steel and ending up with
Robots of an Empire. When it links
to Dawn. Robots of Dawn?
Robots of Dawn is the last one.
The last one. That one, believe it or not, I cried at the end of that one. I thought it was perfect. Actually, and growing up in Australia, you couldn't get a lot of the books that you could get in North America. They're far easier to get here, and especially in Britain as well. Australia, they got imported at great cost if they came in at all. So I would constantly get all my books from the secondhand bookstore. One of the books that I tripped over because I was a big Isaac Asimov fan was I picked up Opus 200.
Nice. I used to own that.
Yes, which was not the fiction book I thought it would be. I started reading it and I got hooked into this whole thing about him being so terribly excited about having written 200 books.
Yeah.
Which is actually really interesting because one of the big things that's happening at the conference this year is my 100th book release party. So.
Yeah, so congratulations.
Thank you.
For me, it's my 300th podcast episode.
Oh, well, there you go. Congratulations. Yeah, that's quite the achievement.
Yeah. Same with you, 100 books. I mean, I only got 4. I got a long way to go to catch up to you.
And I'm thinking, now I've got another 100 to go to catch up with Isaac Asimov.
Actually.
He went on from there.
Do you know how many books he wrote? Because I do. I actually know the number.
Okay.
454.
Oh. Wow, yeah. I don't think.
Now, to be fair, some of those are just him writing intros and edit comments. So you can write some of those.
You could get. And see, the thing is, for my official 100, I carefully weaned out like the box sets and the short stories and stuff like that. It's just the novels. That is still no matter. Look, honestly, most authors, if you look at our career, if we're lucky, it's $20. You've done 100, and if I keep up at this rate, I figure I'll get to the next 100 in about 8 years.
That's awesome. Scary, but awesome. Yeah, I mean,
I just don't know if I can cope with the pace.
I wouldn't worry about it if you did or didn't. I mean, it's a cool number. Don't get me wrong. I have friends that do the algorithm thing on Amazon, right? Yeah. And don't get me wrong, there are authors, and maybe you're one of those authors that can just churn it out on cue. I'm not one of those authors.
Well, see, I put out a book every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So I can write them fast, but I don't worry about the algorithms because I'm published wide. It's the Kindle Unlimited authors that really have to watch the algorithms and make sure that they rank really high straight out of the gate, where for me it's much slower, longer term thing. Yeah,
and I actually prefer that approach because to me, I think because let's say you do decide to slow down for a little bit, you can.
Yeah, I can.
You can. Like authors, the big money for most authors is their backlist. right?
Yes,
That's
for indie authors, yes.
Yeah, no, even big name authors, because
as long as they stay in print, but a lot of them don't.
No, but assuming you stay in print, that's their money.
In that case, yes, backlist.
Yeah, the backlists are always money. It's the money in every industry, because like they say, like, I'm a comic book guy. Comic book guy is a dying industry. It's not. The backlists are huge, right? It's just the reality is, like, the upfront material isn't as much as it used to be.
My husband actually has some original edition Spider-Mans.
Nice. I have original edition Green Lantern, so I'm totally a Green Lantern nut. Yeah. But yeah, no, your husband and me would get along great. I can tell.
Yeah. Well, you'll probably see him around. He's the one wearing the Spider-Man T-shirts.
Sweet. Sweet. Yeah. No, it's. But like what I was saying, like, if there comes a point you like. I just had this interview with Andres. Quality of life changes for all of us at some point. So you get to a point where you're like, you know what? I maybe I want to release a book every 6 weeks.
Well, this is the thing, is even if, and with indie, and this is because, sorry, I am pro indie.
No, absolutely. Go ahead.
But one of the advantages of indie is that you can make that choice because you have 100% control. You have a backlist that keeps making money for you. It's passive income. So I can't remember the name of the author right now. He decided he wanted a year off, and he had, I think, 25 books out. So all he did for that year was just advertise those books.
Yeah.
He didn't bring out a new release or anything like that, and he made just as much money as he had the year before. So there is a lot more flexibility and control with indie publishing, and you can make those sort of choices.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's important. You definitely have similar reading taste in terms of science fiction back then. My other two choices were Ray Bradbury.
Okay.
Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Yeah, no, I sort of veer off a little bit. More recently, I love Peter F. Hamilton.
Very good.
Yes.
Love it. Like I love his the Neutron Mount Columbus.
Pandora's Star.
I haven't read that one yet. I have it. I haven't read it. He's to me his
world building is just
amazing.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
I loved his take on Al Capone. I loved his take on Al Capone.
I have not got to that one yet. I'm actually just working all the way through his backlist.
So that is Neutronium Alchemist.
Okay, yes, that one. Yeah.
Okay, I loved.
That's actually on my.
I loved his take on Capone. I thought it was so genius. Because especially what would Al Capone be like at the end of the world, and with that crisis going on, and it's like. Made so much sense. And
I think I look forward to reading that one then. That sounds rather good. Another alternative history one he did that really impressed me is Watching Trees Grow. It's
I've not heard of that one actually.
It's a novella.
Yeah.
But basically he's positing that the Roman Empire never crumbled. It just carried on. And so families are the big political unit. But they developed because Rome was always a high technology society.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they invented toilets and all sorts of things. It's marvelous. But he was suggesting that the very first scene of the book is set in 1832, and they've already got electricity and basic computers and electronic typewriters, and which would make sense if Rome stayed in control of the power base. They would get that advanced that quickly.
They were at their apex, not their decline, but their apex. They were an incredibly ambitious empire. They were very ambitious, very the roads, their legacy.
But that is actually a myth. I do a lot of history research because I do time travels and historicals and historical fantasies and stuff like that. But one of the myths is that the Romans were really great at building roads, and they were, but they were not the first to think of it. It was actually the Celts that built all the roads. The only problem is they built them out of timber, so they disappeared. The Romans came along and improved the technology and built all the roads out of stone.
Yeah.
So we can find all the Roman roads, but all the Celt roads disappeared.
That's interesting. No, I did not know that. That's actually cool. That's very,
really
very good.
Yeah.
But all right, going back to what I was going to say before you were corrected, the ambition it took, the foresight that took, right? That
they were futurists.
They were thinking very, very long term. Their quote unquote their thieves vinegar, how they dealt with water poisoning, still works to this day, right? There's a lot of Julius Caesar was a prodigy. In fact, he invented the he was an astronomer as much as he was a conqueror. So Hadrian is probably one of the most brilliant leaders of all time.
I mean, actually, no, I would disagree with that. I think one of the greatest leaders.
I'm in terms of his head, not necessarily his politics. In terms of his, let me correct myself. The ideas he had were incredible.
He was a great scientist.
Yes,
but one of the greatest philosophers, I think, was Marcus Aurelius.
Absolutely,
the Stoic.
No. Marcus Aurelius is a philosopher. Like again, he was next to the Greek. Like you go talk about Greek philosophy. Aurelius was applying it as a leader, which is I thought was
it was really incredible.
He arguably was the philosopher king. He arguably was right. I mean. He's one of the most fascinating figures in history. But this is a culture that even to this day you can still see remnants of. You look at the United States in terms of what a lot of people say the United States is a Christian culture. My counter argument to that would be, look what they build monuments to. They're very they're very Greek, or they're very Roman, right? That's what they are. And so you look at Rome. Right, if Rome had not corrupted, right, had not eroded, if they had not put themselves into that state, who knows where they'd have been, right? And even then, remnants of the empire went well into the Middle Ages.
Yeah,
remnants of it.
Well, I mean, Latin, which the Romans spoke, underlies majority of the modern languages.
Yeah.
So, so Peter Hamilton's Watching Trees Grow follows that theory. What if Rome had never crumbled? And it was a great book.
That's a fascinating concept. Yeah. So this has definitely gone in different directions than we talked about off the air, haven't it?
Well, that's the problem. Get me talking, and we can go in any direction.
That's the idea. That is totally the idea.
So, and anyway, I said one more, and you got two. So I'm just trying to think. I'm trying to pick my next favorite author out of that lot, and I think Frank Herbert would be my next one.
He's hit and miss with me. He's hit and miss. So Dune, his odd books are amazing.
Yeah.
His even books, I give him a pass on book 6 only because I know that one, it was due to the fact that he was dying and he was trying to get it out there, and I respect the effort. I don't necessarily like the book, but I respect the effort because because it's one of those. If he had more time, didn't do it his way.
Well, that's the thing. I think he wrote Dune over about 8-year period or something like that. He kept honing it and honing it. He had notes going back years and years. And then it hit big, and suddenly he had to produce the rest of them. So
the third one, not Dune Messiah, but the third one, I can't remember what it's called.
Children of Dune.
Yes, that one's really good too. I really like. I enjoy that one because that one was a really cool legacy story.
Yeah, and see, I like the second one because of the romance in it. Duncan, Idaho.
No. It's a good part of it, but I found the narration to be wasn't quite on point like there was on the.
That's actually something that you find a lot in the second of 3 anything.
Yeah.
Is the second bit is very transitional. It's dealing with a lot of stuff from the first one. It's dealing with a lot of crap it's got to set up for the third one. Third one wraps everything up, and that's always the mind-blowing one.
I'm working on my series. So my first one's just about ready. The idea is actually the cloud today is going to be our archaeology tomorrow. Right. So it's the Matrix meets Indiana Jones.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. It's the Matrix meets Indiana Jones, and so I decided to treat, because of the nature of the story, that each book is like a world in a video game. So there'll be a specific world and your character goes through it. Mm-hmm. So World 1 and World 2 are very different. Right? So the second one will be a complete package in of itself, right? Much like the first book is a complete package. Now, there's definitely, I've done this with my poetry series. There's continuity issues. Right, you always have to make sure the continuity is right when you're doing a series, because that's the big thing. Like the more you go forward, the more you have more back matter you have. So there's things like I set up in book 1 that may not pay off until books 3 and 4, right? Mm-hmm. But those things are like, I looked at it like a comic book concept, in that you have small plots in each of your stories, that
you have an overarching series plot.
Yeah, you have over a series plot, because that way, one of the things it does is it makes sequels, they feel like complete meals in of themselves. I feel like, especially today, because there's so many books are made so much, you have to make sure that your readership gets whatever experience they're going for in your story.
Yes.
Right. You have
to give the readers what they expect.
You have to create that experience exactly, tailor the experience exactly the way you're supposed to. The problem is if you do a trilogy, right? If it's like, and you can. Second books are super hard because you can't resolve everything. But let's say you make a series, an overarching series, right? Well, you have a main story, you resolve it. You have a main story, you resolve it. You still create those resolutions. It's much like, I feel also they're more to life. I have a personal character arc where I was 5 years ago, where I am today. How did I get there? Well, they're based on whatever choices I made from back then, right? There is a logical progression in life. I feel like when you do an overarching series, that feels realer. Whereas if you're doing, and no, don't get me wrong, I'm sure someday I'm going to try the trilogy, and someday I'm going to be like, I hate second books so much, right? Because I can't. The only thing I can really do is I can leave you at a really evil cliffhanger, yeah.
Yeah, and I know I have readers too that are like, I hate cliffhangers. But I think that's why I tend to avoid trilogies myself. I think my two most popular series have both got 12 books in them each at the moment, and I haven't finished with one of them. I'm still going. But and that you tend to get episodic, but that's one of the dangers of the very long series. You start doing what I call the story of the week. You see this on TV series all the time. They start rolling, and you suddenly got the murder of the week. And it takes them like 3 or 4 or 5 episodes to actually get into, start telling character arcs and overriding story arcs and stuff like that. And they get away from that formulaic story of whatever it is the week.
Television. Okay, so television is a unique animal because there's two things that really impact that kind of storytelling. One that everybody knows, but no one talks about: budget.
Yeah.
Right. It can be done. Let me finish. Number two, up until I think early 90s, television was done in a very formulaic way, right? So because television and those that's why comedies are dead today, because no one has made, it's not that you can make a funny show that people would watch, but the fact is that is the one genre in television where it has never evolved beyond the formula. I hate The Big Bang Theory with a passion.
We didn't last much beyond season 4, I think.
No.
Kind of bailed.
No. I hated it because to me, right, they were trying to dumb down. That show could have been brilliant, and there were moments in that show where you could see it. If they just went a little bit more in one direction, the show could have been a very brilliant show. But because again they were using very incredibly old formulas, no matter what, with the characters, right? They were kind of stuck in a rut. And this isn't, by the way, I knocked any of the actors or anybody that's actually performing these things, because it has nothing to do with the efforts they put.
It's the writers and the producers that make those decisions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, so you look at comedy, that's why comedy shows aren't around today.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
But. So you look at science fiction used to be following this trap. Then along, right. Look at Star Trek.
The original series.
Although there's definitely a charm to it. There's definitely a charm to that series.
Yes.
Right.
It was cutting edge at the time.
Well, absolutely. But even today, there is a bit of a charm to it, just because it does attempt. Roddenberry did make some very bold things that a lot of TV shows frankly do not have the balls to do today.
The thing is if you have a look at what shows were airing at the same time Star Trek was, those shows are just so completely banal and old-fashioned in comparison to what Star Trek looks like even now.
Yeah.
So you can sort of tell how advanced it was for its time.
Yeah. So there's that.
Yeah.
But the show that I don't think that I feel changed things was Babylon 5, because Babylon 5 was I think the first serious attempt at doing a novel on television. Season 1 tells an arc. Season 2 tells an arc. Season 3 tells an arc. Season 4 is where they should have ended it. But it's still even so, season 5 still has a few good moments in it, but 1 through 4, it is an amazing story. I think my favorite thing is at the end of the series, they actually show all the characters like when they first showed up and where they ended up, and you could see the story, the road, you could see it, and that show was, although again today, if you look at some of the dialogue, look at some of the choices that were made today, they wouldn't pass muster. It doesn't take away from the fact that at the time those were incredibly bold choices, and because he did a show like that, right? Whether people like right, J. Michael Straczynski should get a lot of love. Whether for all his flaws as a human being, right? All right. As a creator, that was incredibly bold. It allowed shows like Buffy, as much as it didn't. I know, I hate. It's true, but again, Buffy stole from that, and then you look at shows now stuff where it's evolved to today. Now, granted, you have novels definitely feeding this stuff too, but look at Game of Thrones. You look at Breaking Bad. You look at all these shows. These shows saw shows like this doing formulas like that. Not just this show, but other shows that were actually going for this, right, as the blueprint for what they're doing today. And the reason why, like I said, comedy is fallen by the wayside is comedy is the only genre still doing those formulas. Whereas, now
there is one exception.
Oh,
I don't know if you've overlooked it or not. It was transcendent for its time, and it was comedy. MASH.
That's true.
Yes.
That's true.
Yep.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But that was, actually, to be fair, just a little before my time.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a little.
I kind of said, I never actually, because I grew up without television. So
yeah.
I'm still catching up with stuff, and I grew up in Australia.
No, that's true. No,
so I actually caught up with MASH long after it finished.
It's actually, you know what, I am overlook. You're right. I did overlook it, but that's because comedy went so far away from it.
Yeah.
And
but it was transcendent for its time. It had character arcs, it had story arcs,
and also, to be perfectly honest with you, it would hold up today.
Yes.
That show.
Yeah. It is still really entertaining.
It's entertaining. It's fun. And again, just some of the character arcs and developments for all those characters from start to finish.
Yes.
Right.
They moved a long way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I was actually just listening to a Mike Farrell interview yesterday, and he was talking about, because he was in the last 8 seasons playing BJ, and he was talking about the producers and writers would actually consult with the actors and say, how do you feel about us doing blah, blah, blah with your character?
Which makes total sense.
Which is, the actors do have insight into what their characters are.
Have you actually ever gone to a film set? Like the reason I'm asking.
Yeah, I know that's not usual, and that's one of the things that Mike Farrell was saying is it was blowing his mind, because they're saying, "What do you think?" And he's like, "I'm just the actor."
No, but okay. So I've actually had the privilege of actually being working behind the scenes on they're short films, but they're films nonetheless.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of people really do not give actors enough credit for how creative they actually can be.
Yeah.
Also, the other thing too is an actor's challenge is they take this character you put on paper and they have to kind of make it themselves. On some level, they have to figure out a way of doing it. So while I don't think you should give an actor the full rights to the script and go, okay, here, where would you think the character should go? Not necessarily to do that.
Yeah.
But you can say, okay, listen, we're thinking about going this is where I think we're going.
What do you think?
What do you think about this? How would this work in your opinion? Because the other thing too is what you're doing is it's now a collaborative process.
Yeah, and I believe my understanding of the MASH set was it was purely a collaborative effort between cast and crew.
That's the best stuff, because what happens there is now there's a little bit of improv. There's a little bit. And the thing is, life is improv. So I've done interviews on this podcast where I've literally walked from one restaurant to the other and I've kept it airing. I've done other things like that. The reason being is people know when that feels real, because that's life. Life doesn't have this perfect press. It's just things happen.
It's not scripted.
No, at all.
Yeah.
So if you want to make it feel real, add elements you can't control, because the moment you do that, right, now you have a reality, right, and that's what you do, and
The one problem, though, with life and being unscripted is that quite often, I mean, most people read fiction because they want to understand why things happen. So a story is scripted.
Absolutely.
By definition, it is scripted. And so if you don't give the readers that catharsis at the end so that they sort of get to understand why all those terrible things happened to that person, it helps them deal with that sort of stuff in their own life or out in the world and stuff like that. So if you continuously do stuff that is unscripted, sometimes I think readers could potentially miss out.
Well, again, it's almost like it's like we're doing here. There's no script. There's no questions, right?
Yeah.
Right. But the thing is, we're having a back and forth conversation. I'm bouncing off you. You're bouncing off me, and we're creating an interaction. This is great for a conversation. For a story.
Yeah.
For a story, you have to have, the stories do need structure. They need a beginning, a middle and an end, right? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean, though, you can't do elements of chance. I'm working on a rough draft of a current novel. I'm at the part where I'm doing the big finale, which is literally a race at the edge of the sun's corona, trying to fix or repair, starts a race that serves as another function. Well, what I'm going to be doing with that is I'm going to be running a D&D style game with it, because critical failures can make things a lot more interesting.
And that's actually one of the principles. I taught fiction at Grant MacEwan University for about 10 years. And one of the things I often said to the students was you can have coincidence if you want, as long as it breaks bad for the hero. Happy coincidences, good coincidences, where they suddenly get a leg up, don't work in storytelling. They tend to rob the reader.
It depends. Okay, I look at it like, ironically, the Spider-Man principle. Okay, Spider-Man always breaks bad. The problem is it's I think the ratio I feel is like 1 to 4. You can have one good moment if you have 4 bad ones. Because the reality of the situation is, I mean, the realistic thing, no one's that unlucky all the time, right? And the thing is, if you push the breaking bad,
but we're talking about purely just coincidence now, not just necessarily good things happening.
But I mean, what I'm saying is like, breaking. When we're talking about the break bad point, right? Yeah. People have the tendency to think shit's going to go wrong, right? And the thing is,
this is so true too. I mean, how often do you see a movie or a TV series and you've got a happy family in the car just traveling along, looking at the wonderful sunshine, and you think, ooh, what's going to happen?
Exactly.
So everyone's braced for that in storytelling. They're braced for
absolutely.
Bad things.
So you can do that, and the more interesting ones are the ironic ones. Those are the more interesting ones.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the rule is, there's a point, like in a romance. Well, okay, I look at a show like Castle. You knew that they were gonna. She's cringing so bad over here, guys. You have no idea. But okay. Here's the thing, right? You knew those two were going to end up together. The only thing that's interesting is how the chase works. There's
yes, and that's the principle of romance. Is how are these couple going to overcome all the differences and get together at the end?
Exactly. Yeah. But here's the thing, right? If you keep them apart too long, right?
Yeah.
There's a BS. There's a bit of a BS. Like that balance of, if it's too easy, okay, now what, right? And that's
and I think it's an unfortunate thing for particularly for television series, if they're super successful, is how soon do they bring that couple together? The 1980s, there was a TV series called Moonlighting, Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis, and everyone was just dying for them to get together, and they dangled that resolution for I think 5 seasons. As soon as they got them together, the ratings just crashed and burned.
They waited too long. They waited too long. If they had done it, okay. Also, here's the thing: if you're going to make them come together, you have to also introduce an obstacle for them to deal with together. Because the big problem with the romance chase is, once you get it, is almost like
the story's over.
The story's over.
Yeah.
Unless
something else.
There's something else that can follow it, but you have to introduce that element
before
the resolution, because
I think it's one of the trickiest things that you have to handle in storytelling. Is delivering that resolution that the audience is craving, and still keeping them on the hook.
Yeah, no, and that's it, right? But you actually, you might cringe at this one. We've gotten a few cringes here, but I think one of the best it was initially. Anyway, I think the series petered out when it got into its more political directions. Wizard's First Rule by Terry Goodkind. So, Hero, the whole thing was a chase, and the obstacle was actually, for its time, very creative.
Okay.
Right?
I confess I have not seen that one.
Okay. Wizard's First Rule. Okay, so they did make a television series. It's very terrible. It's very, very terrible about it. It's called, I think, Return. What the heck was it called? Something about the Seeker. It was a really terrible, terrible show. But the first novel is actually really good.
Yeah.
The second, but it kept you on the hook because, again, they introduced the really big. Again, fantasy has the luxury of introducing a big bad, right? Right. The quote unquote villain. That villain kind of made faces come up as, but there were still resolutions, mysteries for the second book. The second book was excellent, but it solved all that.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh shit, now what?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Third book's kind of meh. And then the fourth book is, the villain was interesting. It's the first time I've ever seen a plague be a villain, which is an interesting take on the fantasy world.
What about The Stand?
The Stand to me, the plague wasn't really the villain.
It was a character.
No, it was a character, but I don't think it was a villain. I think it was more of an absolute, not necessarily a villain. That because the villainy was Flag. The villainy was that Flag was the villain of the story, right?
I don't know. I've seen different interpretations of that. I've also seen it said that the plague in The Stand was the fist of God, whereas Flag was just a leftover remnant.
That's an interesting take, but the thing is, if you look at the first 100 pages, then after that it's gone. The impact, I find, right, the impact is gone.
Yep. Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So, but that all said, the first 100 pages of that story is some of the best writing I've ever read because it's fantastic. But again, it was one of those situations where, again, an absolute. It was an absolute. It was a catalyst. I draw the line at villain. Character, yes, but I don't think it's a villain. It's also the other thing too. If we're cuttlefish and a sperm whale comes to eat us, is the sperm whale the villain, or is it just somebody doing what it's supposed to do, right? And that's a bigger philosophical question.
Yeah, I think that the people that call it a villain are the ones that propose that the plague actually had its own plan.
Yeah, but even so, it did whatever it was supposed to accomplish. It did. It was Ozymandias. It accomplished its plan and then walked off the set.
Yeah.
Right.
It just left Randall Flagg to
that's it. And so Flagg was the villain of this thing, whereas in Temple of the Winds, which is the book I'm talking about, the plague is the villain for most of the story. So, but once that, but the thing is, as I was going before we went down that road, that's when the series lost its luster because it became, the first two books were the chase and thing, and I think honestly, and I get it, you got successful, you become that successful, the temptation is to, I'm popular, I can see, as you can see, the temptation is to, keep going in the world. I think there comes a point though where you gotta be careful of the integrity. It's one thing that I get, you gotta pay the rent, but there's a point where the property loses if you violate the
Yeah, I think a lot of authors can sometimes get very self-indulgent too because they can publish anything they want and get away with it.
Absolutely.
And I won't name names, but there's quite a few of them that I feel that don't get edited. They just hand in their manuscript and everyone say, oh, well, it's blah, blah, blah. So just, pass it through. They don't argue.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those. It's a balancing act. It's a balancing act because there's. When I go to edit my work, and I don't go speak with myself, I look at the integrity of what I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah, but I'm primarily talking about traditional publishing, where you've got an editor gatekeeper that's saying whether this script passes or not. Indie publishing, the people that get to vote on your manuscript are the readers, and they vote with their wallets.
Yes.
You can't afford to mail it in. You have to do.
Oh no. Well, yeah. Even to I think there's. I'm sure there are points with certain authors. I'm sure that every once in a while you kind of wonder about that last one, but especially in the beginning. Again, you got your integrity.
Yes, but in the beginning, yeah. But I'm quite sure that there's some really well-established authors that can get away with an awful lot.
Oh no, absolutely, well, absolutely. But again, going down that point, right? There's a, again, it's such a catch-22, and I've never been at that point. At that point, maybe I'll get to this problem someday. Gets so successful with a property, well, you should keep doing something with it, but you've said everything you needed to say about it too.
Yeah, that's where spin-offs come in.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But because it's just one of those you don't want to mess with. You don't want to mess with what kill it.
Yeah, and I get I've got a couple of series that I've finished, and I keep getting email from readers saying, "Are you ever going to do any more, please?" And it's like, well, no, because I've done the story. The story's told. So yeah.
But I might do a spin-off. Right.
Potentially.
Yeah. And maybe a reunion story, like a nostalgia story, like once every 10 years, maybe.
Actually, what I have done is, because I'm dealing with time travel and alternative worlds, I get the characters to cross over into different series.
Yeah, that works.
They like that.
Yeah. It's a fun little Easter egg, right? It's a fun little Easter egg. Miss Tracy, we didn't talk about anything we said we were going to talk about, but I still think we had a good interview here. Do you think?
Hey, you read science fiction. You're not all bad.
No, mostly. Don't tell anybody else.
Okay.
All right. So why don't we do this? To wrap things up, why don't you plug your next book coming out in October, you said?
No, actually, I have a book coming out every 3 weeks. The book I was talking about coming out in October is the book 3 in the science fiction series. I have several romances coming out in the meantime.
Okay, so this will be like 290 something. So we're going to see. Let's assume that this will air sometime in September. Okay, so what is coming out around that time? All right, and how can people find you is the last question.
Okay, well, how people can find me is probably the quickest question to answer. Best place to find me is on my website, which is tracycooperposey.com, TracyCooperposey.com. At the bottom of every page, there is the next 4 books that are coming out, so they can find out what's coming up. And while you're there, go to my starter library. You can pick up 4 of my books for free, just to check out what my work is like.
Fair enough.
This episode of Just Joshing is sponsored by Indie Imprint. Indie Imprint supports creators by creators. Whether you are writing a book or creating a video game, Indie Imprint works with its clients to produce, edit, and present their projects to the world. For more information, check out their website at www.indieimprint.com.
And that was my conversation with Tracy Cooper-Posey. It was a blast. Like I said, it was way better than I think either of us expected it to be. Tracy's amazing. She has done an incredible amount of work and feat. She just is a machine at this. Her passion cannot be questioned. Her work cannot be questioned. Check her out. I have one of her books myself. I bought one. It's kind of going with me to when I go to BC. So, Tracy, I'll finally get to read it when I get there. Speaking of which, so I was at CanCon this weekend. I do not have a second Aurora this year, which is kind of a good thing. I kind of made a pact with Pat Flowing. If I had won the second Aurora, I would have to dress in a tutu and do oops, I did it again. That didn't happen. It didn't have to happen this year, thank God. Unfortunately, if I ever do win another Aurora, that will go up for grabs. And but in all seriousness, Ed Willett definitely deserves it. He has a great podcast. The World Shapers podcast is really, really good, and he deserved the win. And congrats to Ed, and congrats to everybody else that won. It was definitely a cool list of people that got the opportunity. But while I was out there, I got finally the word on what I'm waiting for. I applied for a transfer, and I got it. Tomorrow, I get to kind of negotiate my day, but I know that around November 5th, I'll be at the end. So I got to do some hard things tomorrow. I haven't been able to tell my landlord anything because I could say, oh, I'm transport. I could have said something about a transfer, but I had no clear idea of date or time or anything like that. But time's up. So Calgary is going to be a distant memory soon. Kind of bittersweet about it. I still got a lot of work to do. 2 weeks, it's not a ton of time to be completely ready, but that'll be the mission for the next few days for sure. But yeah, the journey's over. This journey's over. Part of the journey's over, and another journey's beginning, and I'm very excited about that. That all said, I am going to miss a lot of people I've gotten to meet and grow with in Calgary. So definitely bittersweet, but I feel excited. I need the change, and I can't wait to change. And in the days and weeks to come, more will be talked about. But yeah, it's going to be fun. That will do it for this episode of Just Joshing. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so in a number of different ways. You can subscribe to it. I'm on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Podomatic, a few other places as well. Definitely hit the subscribe button, listen to a few episodes. Go for it. Support my sponsors. Indie Imprint this month is Get Your Ass to Mars. Dragon Editions being released in November. Pre-orders now, the correct release date is October 31st. So if you order on Steam, get it on your computer, go do it. It kicks ass. I promise you, it's a cool strategy game. If you love Sims, strategy, survival, this is for you. My books, The Watcher, Storm Dancer, Wandering God. That's right, I got more book news. I'll save that for Thursday. The Watcher, Storm Dancer, Wandering God is available at MuralPublishing.com. My handle is at jpenteloresco on Twitter and Instagram. My YouTube channel is Joshua Penteloresco. I just uploaded 3 amazing interviews with Stina Holmes, Susan Forrest, and Kelsey Ray Barthel. I have over 260 interviews to listen to there, so definitely check it out. But above all else, guys, stay inspired. Don't apologize for being you. Just do you, and let the rest come. All right, guys. See you next time.
Josh.